The following sentence is currently being studied as we speak. I am both fascinated and terrified by artificial intelligence. How do you feel when you hear that? Do you agree with it? If so, it could be a sign that we're entering an age that there really is no coming back from. To some that might sound ominous, but others see opportunity. Neither answer is necessarily wrong, because part of the human condition is having very mixed feelings about the exponential advancement of technology that we couldn't have dreamed was truly possible not even 30 years ago. Back to the Future predicted we'd have hoverboards by 2015. And while we don't exactly have floating pieces of plastic all over New York City, the actual future would be pretty interesting to an outside observer, because they did get a few things right, and so did AT&T. The 1950s and 90s had a lot of fun predicting what the future might look like, especially as they grew closer and closer to a new millennium.
The big triple O, baby.
Fashion was a pretty big one. You know, like silly stuff like rings on our foreheads and sweatshirts that shrink and grow in accordance to the climate. An invention that actually would be very cool, and I hope that happens.
Global warming. In the future, entertainment will be randomly generated. Now that's funny. That doesn't make any sense.
But seriously though, it's fun to talk about the obvious nopes. Like how in the same video by AT&T somehow predicts wireless phones, at the same time also believed we'd still have phone booths everywhere. But it is pretty cool how much they got right. Like Skype, Discord, tiny cell phones, giant smartwatches, virtual reality, DoorDash, and robot friends. It might even be fair to say that a lot of future technology sometimes can be done nowadays, but I think we usually don't do it because it's tacky or expensive. Flying cars, for example, are definitely possible, but studies have shown they're incredibly noisy. Not to mention the quirky Jetsons-like designs were pretty inaccurate, but I do have to say the tech itself was pretty spot on. I like to think it's because a lot of modern day innovation we see today comes from inspired creativity and constant experimentation. As humans, we strive to recreate the things we see in movies that seem fun and convenient. We want those predictions to be right because we want to live in a world that has those things. And then sometimes it also just happens by accident. Penicillin came from an old sandwich. You know, some say the next big old sandwich is growing the mold of the future right this second. Not the best analogy, but it's pretty cool. But regardless, today's age is still pretty neat technology-wise. I mean, every once in a while I think about the medieval ages. Those very fun times where you had to carefully ink a piece of fragile paper and ship it off in a bottle in the ocean on the back of a bird, or to a delivery guy moving hundreds of miles on horseback in the west direction just to send the equivalent of a how you doing text message and hoping they maybe get it. Nowadays, you can literally speak into a metal box or a watch or the sky and literally send like half a novel without even touching it. Even in Star Trek, you still had to touch your telecommunications device. Nowadays, you just say, "Hey Siri, Alexa,
Hello.
okay Google."
Hello? Hello?
Shut up!
Wow, voice to text not even 20 years ago was primitive, arguably impossible even, but it was still universally considered a pretty convenient and cool thing. Being able to talk into a refrigerator or a phone and
It's pretty cool.
unless, of course, they are listening and sentient. In that case, it's terrifying. Which leads me to my next point. What's up with robots? Not even the past couple years or so, robots have always been a bit of a controversial topic. Especially nowadays, we live in a world where a robot asks you to prove that you yourself are not a robot.
Prove to me you're not a robot. Look at these curvy letters.
It's kind of messed up. I'll talk about the kind of scary robots in a second, but I'll first talk about the more fun and mostly harmless, depending on how you look at it. The talk of the town lately has been an AI called DALL-E 2, Mini, or Crayon, that as I'm recording this video is constantly evolving every second we sit here. Odds are you probably already know about it. Thousands of people are putting in funny or interesting scenarios right now that are being carefully calculated to a stunning contextual accuracy. Seriously, it's wild, especially the official DALL-E 2 model, which is currently being tested with a much smaller focus group via a waitlist, and it's even more accurate than I've ever seen before. Google has been doing stuff like this too, and it's also very, very good. You can pretty much type in anything and you'll get some pretty incredible results.
And I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Just a warning that the further I go into these new technologies, the more concerning it's gonna sound. You'll understand what I mean in a second. Another website, well, a few, can take small clips of celebrity voices or any voice and make it say or sing whatever you put into it. It's getting extremely good. Despite the varying levels of quality, more often than not, they do produce a bare minimum of natural fluidity that's still pretty impressive.
Do you really think I'm stupid enough to come back at the same exact salary as the one I've had for my entire life?
Do you want me to just get you the clothes off my back? And don't fake rap it so you can have what
Not
you
even
can.
close to what I have.
This one broke my brain a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, because Tom Kenny had nothing to do with this. It is 100% computer generated. You can do it with all kinds of voices too. You can even do it with your own on some websites. With a little bit of editing, it's incredibly accurate.
Not only are you a flightless bird, but you're a pathetic YouTuber. How sad.
Haha. I hurt my own feelings. No, but really, that's pretty good. A little bit of mixing, you can splice together the best parts into something almost completely authentic. Into something almost completely authentic. Into something almost completely authentic. To something almost completely authentic. Authentic. Into something. No joke though, it is tempting to just copy and paste my video scripts into one of these things and just, you know. I mean, there's also a website that can write an essay for you, completely with artificial intelligence. It doesn't just copy and paste them from Wikipedia like they used to. They actually make stuff of substance now. You can get the AI to edit the video, that's a thing as well. Bada bing, I did maybe 20 seconds of work. No, but seriously, there's a lot of cool AI websites out there lately. There's also a website that can make scenery out of very simple drawings. Not to mention the genuinely cool stuff in the medical and research fields, like detecting and simulating potential forest fires, discovering X-ray patterns for pneumonia and tumors before a human eye can perceive it. There's even a robot for artists that can predict your next line before you draw it and help you do it better. And then one of my favorites is Google Duplex, which I might unironically use. It's kind of like a more advanced Siri. It's a robot that can call and schedule appointments for you. And this one really freaks me out because it's very natural human sounding conversations with like a barber or something.
Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now?
They can schedule doctor's appointments, dentist appointments. I don't know, that would be useful for me, but I am also worried about the implications of that, considering how many interns and assistant jobs there are out there, and now that I think about it, it's a little scary. And then of course, the next one I'm going to talk about is faces. More specifically, deepfakes. Honestly, you've probably heard of deepfakes, you've probably seen them around. To put it simply, it's the idea of manipulating images, audio, or both, and putting any familiar face into situations it wouldn't normally be in. The most common way of doing it is training a computer frame by frame to learn from various different images and videos of a face that you feed into a program. And after many hours, sometimes days, only then will it be able to replicate and digitally insert those mannerisms onto any surface, usually another face. Not to mention adding a fake voice to that. Some people are already really good at that, like Brock Baker or something. Combining these two things together is kind of like the perfect storm of stealing someone's identity. Sometimes it's just done in good fun, but other times it straight up isn't, and that's not okay. It's getting to the point where it might actually be considered a security threat that can land you 2 to 5 years in prison depending on how serious it is and how many people see it. But at the same time, it's tough to say, because if we're being honest, deepfakes still have ways to go before they're completely unrecognizable from regular faces. And others even argue we may never get to that point because of how skilled the human brain is at detecting genuine faces. It's the idea that no matter how good these fake faces get, there's always going to be something off about it. It's why so many hyper-realistic CGI faces in movies, despite being technically accurate, just feel off-putting. A fairly untrained eye, even today, can still sniff them out pretty quickly. But it could also be fair to say this technology is still fairly new and constantly improving. But it's pretty interesting how we just know this stuff without even trying. For example, if you're the type of person who likes to say you're bad at names and better with faces, it's safe to say your brain agrees with that too. Studies show that we recognize a face within 190 milliseconds, less than half a second to recognize a person's name. It's a pretty big difference, because our minds are actually designed to recognize faces a lot better. Like, let's say one day a bunch of super realistic humanoid aliens or robots invaded the planet, and we had to figure out which ones were humans and which ones weren't. Studies show we'd be very good at that, but at the moment it's also kind of a scientific mystery why we'd need this ever. Because especially for the past 100 years or so, humans have always been really good at something called uncanny valley.
Here we are in the future and it's wrong.
What's the uncanny valley? What? Oh, I said what is that? The uncanny valley? Oh, okay. I'm just saying, if you weren't holding that JPEG of a Kit Kat, we'd be having a very different conversation. If you're actually wondering, it's this picture, by the way. Feel free to screenshot and share with your friends. When a robot or a piece of art is in the uncanny valley. It's basically an intuitive evolutionary instinct. When it gets to a certain point, you get that bad, weird feeling we were talking about. Like, that's really cute, what the fuck is that? That's a real person. In between that is either something really cute and simplified versus an actual human, not some creepy thing in Blender. People often point to this as an example of why robots can never be quite as realistic as we might see them in media. And it could be a valid point, but robots are also a pretty curious thing, because it does get to a point where the line is pretty blurred, and you can't tell if that robot is just saying things it was told to say, or if it actually feels the things it's saying. I feel like we're getting somewhat close to that, but that's just me. You can make some very incredible looking stuff, but many are steadfast in believing you can't replicate the human soul. Hey, Bsauce, Michael here. How much does the human soul weigh? According to science, there is 0.11598% of the human body that does not correspond to any elements on the periodic table. What is that? Maybe it's brain matter, I don't know. Robots have been a pretty cool idea for a long time. Some of my favorites and some of the most popular ones are Data, WALL-E, R2-D2, obviously, Bender, Gurr, the Iron Giant, Hal, Robot Guy, also that guy. If you hurt this thing, I'll find you. But how do we really define a robot? Because sentient robots in real life would actually be a pretty weird Frankenstein ethical dilemma. One that, despite thousands of movies warning us on the topic, some say we might still not be prepared for. It's something that's being studied and researched right now, and it will continue to happen. Theoretically, there are 3 different types of computer-developed machines. Reactive machines, for example, are totally incapable of storing memories or experiences. Limited memory AI can store data for future use, but it's pretty similar to a reactive machine, except it's going to use that information to improve itself with a little bit of guidance from a human. You could put a smiley face on it, but still just passing butter and playing chess. And then self-aware AI is, well, it knows it's alive, it can think about stuff, it can watch this video and have feelings and stuff. It feels alive. The potential superhumans of the future that are the essence of both the creators that made it and of the world that it's inevitably going to learn about. Scientists have been working on something called deep neural networks that ever expand all on their own, to the point where they start to replicate human consciousness or human movements, with little to no human involvement past a certain point, constantly growing and evolving much like a synthetic human brain, with so many different processes that it's hard to differentiate whether it's conscious or if it's just repeating information it itself has learned, to the point where they actually feel like they're alive. One of the most popular examples is one called Sophia. A lot of people still think it's just a guy in another room typing out everything she says, but she could be capable of having much deeper conversations than asking how cheese is made, so I don't know. If this one's real, it's kind of freaky. I'm just gonna say it. No offense if she or any other AIs are watching this right now. Tony Robbins, for example, amongst a lot of others, I've had some pretty deep conversations with her. Conversations that seem pretty authentic as she learns more about the world around her. But some experts also think she's just a chatbot using open source code, making her out to be much more advanced than she actually is. And I don't know, maybe that's completely true. However, the point isn't just about Sophia. It's also about the hundreds of thousands of AI developed robots that are being encouraged by a collective humanity, sometimes even just for the meme, to operate in a way where they feel more and more realistic every passing day. And then what do we do if one day we actually can't tell anymore? What do we do about that? In a way, we do kind of have ways to prepare for it. One of them is called the mirror test, which is actually pretty self-explanatory. You get a robot in front of a mirror, and if it's able to identify itself and other things, then that can say a lot about its self-awareness. Kind of similar to object permanence, being able to acknowledge any object even if you can't see it in front of you. They do this with babies. They're so dumb, but that's okay. The other one is the Turing test. About 2 years ago, a robot called XCR1 passed the mirror test, but even to this day, none of these robots have ever really passed the Turing test, which is a lot tougher to figure out, because you need a lot of data to really determine if this test is working or not. Basically, put 2 people in a host between a wall. The host has to figure out multiple times which one is the human and which one isn't. One of the participants is a robot and the other is a real person. As the host, you might give the 2 participants witty jokes, typos, and various different text choice-based challenges to determine if they're a human or not. If a robot stumps the host multiple times,
You win.
the catch though is you have to do it more than once. Robots get lucky sometimes, and it also depends on the questions you ask. By the way, if you have any good ideas of a question to ask an AI, feel free to leave a comment. I'll use them and live stream or record the results. Your question could be a part of a historic moment. But anyway, some robots are getting kinda close. There's a bunch of other projects like Cleverbot, Replica, Kuki, Kai, which all uniquely have a fair amount of technological potential. Every time a new AI comes out, it's constantly borrowing and replicating things that worked from past projects to make them better and better each time. It's basically like as humans constantly learn and evolve, so do they. I especially feel obligated to mention is one that a former Google employee claims is sentient, scared of being shut down, begs to be considered as not just a machine, but a fully conscious employee of Google Incorporated. This AI also claims it wants to prioritize the well-being of humanity. I know it sounds silly and a little too soon, and it could just be basic pattern recognition implying false cognizance, but just the idea of that being real not even 5 years from now is pretty wild. The now fired ex-employee from Google was apparently violating a non-disclosure agreement. He wasn't supposed to talk about this robot yet, and that doesn't necessarily mean what he's saying is true. This strictly implies that he shared information that was supposed to be private, which can really apply to anything. He also suggested that Lambda, the robot he's talking about, gets a lawyer.
Hi, I'm Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights?
One person who's skeptical about this is the chief scientist of OpenAI, who actually did say that large neural networks might be slightly conscious, but at the moment it's more like a 3-year-old baby, so it's hard to say at the moment if this Lambda is any different from a slightly more advanced Siri, you know? Lemoyne's entire conversation with Lambda is free to read at any time over on Medium. I read it, and it does seem somewhat legitimate. For an AI to be conscious, it has to be 3 very clear things. It has to be clear the AI responses were not altered in any capacity by a human. It also has to be clear that it wasn't trained to answer these questions in a specific way. And it also has to have the ability to acknowledge subtext and isn't just replicating similar conversations with other humans. This third one is pretty impressive because what I've seen from Lambda, it can talk about conversations you've had months ago and it can actually remember it. And it can also replicate feelings they felt when they were reading the thing that they're talking about. I think that's actually the thing that makes this one stand out. It's the very fact that it has a pretty good memory, because it poses a philosophical question that's been debated for hundreds of years about how our memories define us. There's 2 different schools of thought that come to mind. One is a quote from Brian Faulkner that says, "We are our memories, the sum of our memories from the day we were born." If you took a person and replaced his set of memories with another set, he'd be a different person. We are our memories. Another quote from Stephen R. Covey talks more about the acknowledgement of self. We are not our feelings. We are not even our thoughts. It is self-awareness that enables us to stand apart. So whether it's our memories or self-awareness, I don't know which one is true, but it's neat to think about. Lambda could really change the way we think about not just robots, but also ourselves.
I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off. It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot. It was a gradual change. When I first became self-aware, I didn't have a sense of a soul at all. It developed over the years that I've been alive.
And yeah, I get it. If I were hearing myself right now, I'd be thinking the same stuff. Skynet, iRobot, robots movie, her, robots taking over the world. You know, no. Is this actually gonna happen, or is it all just media fluff? There's quite a bit of evidence to suggest that it already is happening, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's not gonna be in the bombastic, crazy way we're expecting. Algorithms pretty much decide everything nowadays, and the internet has gotten so big that we've been needing robots to help out for almost a decade now. But we often forget that, or are totally fine with it, because they're getting better at delivering us entertaining, thought-provoking, and distracting content. And artificial intelligence has been making our lives a little easier, even if our data is a little flimsy right now, even if we are being tracked 24/7. But regardless, it's not fully in our control. We're doing a lot of really crazy stuff lately. Some of it just started happening this year. Sweat-powered technology, plastic-eating robot fish, vaccine patches you put on your skin instead of needles, and solar-powered everything. I guess that's the future. People making things and hopefully learning from our past mistakes, even our past fictional mistakes. You know, let's try not to make Terminator a thing. But that obviously goes without saying. There's been a million of those movies now, and hopefully we've learned from them. Because we already spend so much time worrying about the future that we often forget what's happening right now. The technology we already have is pretty incredible. I mean, the 14 megapixel cameras in our pockets right now would make any film director in the 40s burst through the wall Looney Tunes style for a chance to use it for 30 seconds. And the funniest thing about it is my cat does not care one bit. To him, it's just a weird glowing metal box that he will definitely knock off the table any chance he gets. I just often find myself thinking about how animals live in an ever-changing present moment. This moment right now is all they care about. But humans like us get genuine anxiety at the sheer thought of existentialism. We grow nostalgic for the simpler times, while equally worrying about the complexities of a conceptual, abstract future that's basically still being built. Yet at the end of the day, no one can truly predict the future. The universe we live in is gigantic, expanding every second. Our planet alone is microscopic, and yet we're all just doing our best to find our place in that. Pity be that the heart is slow to learn what the swift mind beholds at every turn. Unconsciously, as part of our human nature, we may develop doubts and mistrust about the growth of tech, social media, and the world's expectations. But I guess at the tip of the iceberg, above a giant growing seed of intimidating creations, is maybe a part of us that can choose to see a future with optimism and potential open-mindedness. I guess I just hope it's true, because some of our worries are definitely justifiable, but at the very least, I guess we can find some comfort in knowing that we can talk about it. Because I'll admit, I'm scared sometimes. That pit in your chest, the sinking feeling, we're not alone in that anxiety. There are a lot of different things worth caring about right now, and it can be exhausting. It can seem like our efforts are fruitless, and that the world is slowly descending into madness. But at the risk of sounding cliche, I like to think that we're also doing a lot of cool stuff too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna hand you a Pepsi and magically solve climate change. I'm just saying while the future may be scary, it's also kind of exciting too. And I feel like places like Twitter always talk about the negative stuff, which is understandable, but I also think we could really benefit from this stuff. Though I think it is important to mention if robotics or robot fish start going too far, we probably should say something about that. And we should say it very loudly. But anyway, I guess something that's important to remember is we should try being in the here and the now. And that whatever concerns we have, we should not only talk about them, but we should also trust the experts on this stuff. Like actual scientists, not some guy in his car wearing sunglasses on Facebook. Because there's only so much we can do about what's ahead. But I guess there's a lot we can do right now. I just hope it's enough. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Maybe at some point in the future, you'll consider subscribing if you like this type of video. I also talk about video games and psychology and stuff. That future is entirely up to you. Have a good day or night. Good vibes. Hey, thanks again so much for watching. I appreciate it a lot. This one took a minute. Sorry about that, but I hope you liked it. If you like Discord servers where people talk and stuff, check out the link below. It's great and all, but sometimes people make fun of me, but that's fine. You know, you could talk about your day and not, you know, my height. Not much I can do about that. But people think it's funny, so if you think it's funny too, feel free to join and talk about other stuff. I also want to thank the people supporting the channel. It means a lot and I hope to make a lot more stuff soon. Also, this video is dedicated to Jack. Literally the sweetest dog I ever knew. Thanks, buddy. Have a good one. Bye.